Hey, good evening. What's happening, everybody? Thanks for being here tonight. I'm Robert Phoenix, and we are now streaming live. I appreciate your patience. I had to reboot my computer because Zoom wasn't really playing nice tonight. So anyway, here I am, and there you are, and here we are on the precipice of what might be one of the most historical weeks in a long time, maybe ever. And we're going to do our best to get into it tonight and talk about what's happening. And we're going to tend to focus a little bit on the Ukrainian situation, which is really looking like this complete media fabrication. Like right now, I really wouldn't trust anything. Okay. Let's just be very clear about that. But what we are going to look at tonight in relationship to Ukraine and the sort of the big day, the big run up, because I keep reading that Zhirinovsky is going to launch an attack from Russia into Ukraine on 2/22/22, which of course would line up with the current model of a United States, Russia global apocalyptic prophecy. So there are clearly a lot of indicators. I wouldn't call them indicators, really. I would say there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise out there. And what we're going to try to do is cut through the signal, cut through the noise to get to the signal. And one of the things we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at Kamala Harris's chart, because there are some very interesting things happening with Kamala Harris. Now, if you follow my weekday show, 15 Minutes of Flame, over on 15minutesofflame.com, you'll know that I really got into San Francisco pretty deeply last week. And I started with, actually, this all started last Sunday night when I did a stream for 4 hours, and I promise I won't do another 4-hour stream tonight. We're going to try to do something economical, like maybe about 2 hours max. Okay, so I'm gonna try to be Mr. Virgo here and get it to you straight, no chaser, right? But it started last week, and I got into 1977, and 1977 bleeds into 1978, and there's some key things that happened in 1977. One of which is the election of Harvey Milk to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and there's a lot happening with the election of George Moscone, Mayor George Moscone, which happens previous to that. I think Moscone is inaugurated, I think, what is it, 70? I think it's 76. He's not for very long. So let me just check here real fast. Okay. So he's inaugurated in January 8th of 1976. So I was right. And by 1978, which is 4 days after his birthday, he is supposedly killed by Dan White, though I have my doubts about that, because the way that Dan White had to get into San Francisco City Hall was ridiculous. He literally had to go through a window that was barely big enough to fit him, somehow managed to open it up, and it's like right next to the ground off to the side. And I'm not sure he was able to do that. Other people have looked at it and they've pushed back in this idea of Dan White actually doing that. Now, was he there inside of the City Hall? Sure, why not? Did he get there through going through this window on the site? Doubtful. Was he a Manchurian candidate? I don't think he pulled the trigger, but I think he was there. I think he was inside of the building. And if you look at Dan White's background, it's, he's goes through the Vietnam War. He comes back. He's a basket case. He was a fireman. He was on the police force, and he had a violent record on the police force. So Dan White had a history of violence, and I think he came from, what district is that? Like somewhere out in the Avenue, somewhere pretty conservative, and he got elected through that district. And it was his first election, first time as a supervisor. Anyway, so it all starts in '77 when Harvey Milk is elected to be supervisor of San Francisco. And then we go into 1978. And then in 1978 in San Francisco, all hell breaks loose, right? So what's interesting is 1977 for the country and the world, all hell breaks loose. And if you remember all the plane crashes that I talked about in 1977, 78 starts off with one or two plane crashes, and then they just level off. You don't get the same kind of like air tragedy. And if you stayed around long enough, I think it's the Jupiter-Neptune opposition with Jupiter in Gemini, which has a lot to do with travel. It's in its fall in Gemini, and it's opposite Neptune in Sagittarius, which has to do with long distance travel. Although some of those flights were domestic flights, a lot of them were overseas flights. And of course, the biggest being the one in Tenerife. Still to this day, I think probably the worst airline crash in history. So you can see that by the time we get to 78, all that stuff just drops off. So from an astrological perspective, that's a really interesting note. But then all hell breaks loose in San Francisco starting in November of 78, and it all starts with Jonestown. And then, so I got into that. I got into the Jonestown piece. I'm probably going to return to it tomorrow, although tomorrow I'll spend a fair amount of time talking about Synanon. And tonight we're actually going to look at the chart of Chuck Dieterich, who was the founder of Synanon. That'll be after we get into the 22222 stuff. It's a fascinating chart. Synanon's a fascinating, bizarre story. California during the 60s and the 70s is one of the craziest, wild places on Earth. It is the hot zone for mind control, MK Ultra, CIA operations coming over from Vietnam, Project Phoenix. You have spiritual communities, you have cults. It's all happening in California during that period of the 60s and the 70s. We're going to talk about Chuck Dieterich and the birth of Synanon, and we'll actually wrap it into astrology so you can see how astrology plays a role in the birth of certain groups and organizations, particularly Synanon in this case. So we're going to get there. But what happened is I went down this rabbit hole and I just kept kind of digging, right? And when you get to the bottom of it's not even the bottom, it's about 3/4 of the way, maybe halfway through the George Moscone rabbit hole, Willie Brown pops up. And I did a show last week on Willie Brown, which was pretty interesting because Willie Brown is really one of the most powerful politicians in the 20th century, bar none. And we looked at his chart. You're going to take a look at it again tonight, and it's going to be in relationship with Kamala Harris. And then the final show on Thursday was us doing a dive into Kamala Harris's incubation period in San Francisco. San Francisco becomes this hotbed, and all these people that are currently players on the scene right now, they were all there. They were all there during the 70s, and they really get their launching point during the latter part of the 70s, moving into the 80s. Nancy Pelosi comes onto the scene in the 80s. Her brother-in-law, Ron Pelosi, who is Gavin Newsom's uncle, is part of the Board of Supervisors back in the 70s. He's around when the whole Dan White thing and George Moscone thing happens. Dianne Feinstein is elected to be the head of the board of supervisors. So once Moscone is killed, she takes his place as mayor, and that launches her political career. So the Thursday show was all about Kamala Harris and how it is through Willie Brown that Kamala Harris gets introduced to San Francisco's high society. And she really is taken in and becomes sort of one of their own. And we're going to look at the synastry between Kamala Harris and Willie Brown. And you can see where Willie Brown plays a huge role and vice versa in the launching of Kamala Harris's political career. And there seems to have this there seems to be sort of this role of destiny in some ways with Kamala Harris, because after that, she never loses. Well, she wins her first election. Her first election is DA of San Francisco. And then I believe she runs for the attorney general position in California. She gets that. Then she runs for senator. She gets that. And then she hangs around the Senate for a while. And then she begins her presidential bid, which she is not successful at. But even though she's one of the worst candidates on the campaign trail and is totally eviscerated by Tulsi Gabbard, she winds up becoming the vice president of the United States. So I believe that before Joe Biden's term is over, and it may actually be sooner rather than later, Kamala Harris will be president of the United States. No matter how unlikable she is, no matter how much the Biden people, Ron Klain, all these kind of longtime Biden cronies, no matter how much they don't like her, I believe she will be president of the United States before Biden's term is over. And we just got a glimpse of what that will look like. And we'll get into it, and I'll show you the timing right now for Harris. I'll show you the astrological timing for Harris. And then, we'll be dealing, in my estimation, with a Harris presidency. It'll be a heresy. Now, I think that she will play a role here in the next few days, maybe the next week. So one of the things that I learned about as I went through this deep dive into the history of Willie Brown and even George Moscone is that sometimes they will set up events. Like, for instance, I think it was Willie Brown. It was Moscone. It was Moscone who oversaw a sanitation strike in San Francisco, and it lasted 2 days. So I have no microscope into that event from a local political, even though I grew up in that area. I was around some of these people kind of directly in a weird way, but also kind of indirectly in the year 1988 when I worked for San Francisco Magazine. I got to meet some of these people indirectly. So anyway, or directly and indirectly. So I don't really have any insight into the validity about what I'm saying. It's all purely based on a hunch. Is that there was a sanitation strike in Moscone's first term as mayor, and it lasted 2 days, and Moscone came in and he solved it. So my feeling was that they probably arranged this. Like Moscone sat down with the sanitation group, right? Whoever it was, and the sort of running sanitation in San Francisco said, look, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to get you guys a new deal. And you're going to go on strike. And here's the deal. It's already done. In 2 days in, I'm going to come in and I'm going to solve this thing, and you're going to get what you want. All you got to do is be on strike for a couple of days. They're like, sure, we'll do that. So the sanitation people go on strike. 2 days later, Moscone solves it. They get what they need. Oh, great. They averted a major strike. Because, at that time in the 70s, what was going on in New York is that New York had come through the late 60s and the early 70s, and you had Cloward Piven basically putting all these New York workers, particularly the utilities workers, particularly the sanitation workers, they were putting them on strike. So what happened was, in order to meet the trash just kept piling up in New York City, and John Lindsay, who was the mayor, eventually had to pay them a lot more money to go pick up the trash. So this was one of the strategies of Cloward Piven, and Cloward Piven were, I think it was Francis Fox Piven and what's his name, Jeremy Cloward. There were a couple of professors, and they had the strategy, which was, we're gonna break New York City, and we're going to use the welfare system against it. Right? It's kind of like AIDS, right? You're using your own immune system against you. It's like socioeconomic AIDS, and that's what they did. And they bankrupted New York City. They were very, very good at it, but they would get people to do things. They would get like the sanitation workers, these unions, to go on strike. It would paralyze the city. It would make John Lindsay, who was the mayor, look pretty bad. And he was kind of this hip mayor who was connected to the Kennedys. And by the time his mayoralty was over, it was a disaster. And then every mayor after Lindsay kind of gets worse because the city is in this deep economic and financial hell. And it's only until they get to Giuliani do they begin to turn the city around. Anyway, that's what they did. They do these things. They arrange these events. So it looks like somebody comes in and, saves the day. Here's Captain Moscone. Captain Moscone comes in and saves the day. So I feel like we could be looking at some of that potentially with Kamala Harris, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Before I go there, let's see who's here, and I want to check in with you guys. Let's see what we got in chat. Again, thanks to your patience, I had to reboot everything because this camera wasn't working. We got Joan S. batting lead off, a lovely and talented one. Jay is here. Kate of Utica, what's going on, Kate? Super Chang, checking in from the Great White North. Dave and Nicole, good to see you. Beth Berry's here. Ms. BC, Fender Bender. JJ Rain de Blanc is here. By the way, we had a nice little Chatlandia, a little satellite get together yesterday. Some of you might know one of my favorite Chatlanders, Donna the Antichrist Dickerson, was here, and she brought with her the lovely Miss Scorpio herself. She was here, and Mr. Scorpio as well was here. Of course, we're talking about Benito, the Shadow Man Diaz, and then we had who else? Oh, we had Miss Scorpio's ex-husband, and who else? Oh yeah, Rod and Dorothy. So we had a little Chattaria get together here. By the way, Miss Scorpio is JMP Love in chat. Just to let you know, I was doing Miss Scorpio, Mr. Scorpio. So right now, I guess the Magical Mystery Tour is on the coast, and they're down in Galveston. That was a cool little spontaneous get together. All right, who else do we have? Susie Gemini, what's happening? Yes, we will talk about the Pluto return. Ryan, back in the house. What's going on, Ryan? Beth Cummings from the middle. Hi, Beth. Good to see you. Fifth Dimension or Bust. I love that. Greetings from San Francisco Airport. When I was a kid, man, I loved walking around the San Francisco Airport. We'd go there for entertainment. Meowgical Catacorn, what's going on from up there near Dallas? Rob Chopra, the red-pilled one. What's going on, Rob? Good to see you. Mary Stevens, Rapid City, South Dakota, checking in. April Himmel's here. Hello, April. Cheryl Luciavo. What's going on, Cheryl? From the, what do you call that? The Stone Crab State, Maryland. Dave Sullivan. Hey, Dave. Good to see you. Ms. Behaving too. Lana Anderson. Always a pleasure when you drop by. Glenn Miller. What's going on, Glenn? You were a big hit back in the 30s. But there was a big controversy about Glenn Miller. Like there was this controversy that Glenn Miller's plane went down so that Benny Goodman could become the number one swing guy. And I think Benny Goodman had a brother, didn't he? Like there's this weird conspiracy about Glenn Miller's plane going down. Speaking of planes, DJ MC in the house. Like he enjoyed our little trip down memory lane in San Francisco. Ayurveda and astrology. What's going on? A&A. Isla Wren is here. Hi, Isla. Tesmerk, it's Christy. What's happening? There she is, the occult priestess. I think our show is coming up here soon. Camel toe. We're going to get into camel toe here really quick. Who else do we have? CC Jones. What's going on, Fran? Good to see you. Thomas, my man. TJ, Tom Jordan. Check it in. We got our Massachusetts contingency here. Who else do we have? Carol, what's going on, Carol? We got to check in, Carol. We got to catch up. Dawn Hart. Sunny Dawn from Houston. What's going on, Dawn? Oh, let's see. Susan Chappelle. Hi, Susan. It's been a while since I've seen you. Van Man 33. Oh, Vayman 33. What's going on, Vayman? Who else do we have? Chia Pet. I never owned a Chia Pet, but I wouldn't be opposed to one. Let's see. Emily Moore, the techno brat in the house. What's going on? Who would be Kamala's VP? It'd have to be a white guy. Because the white guy would have to be second in command. That's what I think. I don't think it would be Hillary. I don't think it'd be Hillary. I don't think it would be Michelle Obama. It could be somebody like Cory Booker. Could be. But I think it would probably be. Here's who I think it'd be. I think it'd be Pete Buttigieg, because now you've got Kamala Harris, who represents, BIPOC, right? And then you have Pete Buttigieg, who represents the LGBTQ mafia. He's white. He's a guy, but he's definitely on the double sub side. That's who I think would become vice president. Pete Buttigieg. All right, who else do we have? I don't think it'll be. I don't think it'll be Hillary. Like I said, it's got to be a white dude. Let's see who else. Jan Augenstein. What's going on, Jan? Hope you and your mother are doing well. Let's see. Lisa Chandless. What up from LA 310? I think, if I'm not mistaken. Justice Moody. Hey, Justice. Southwest Florida real estate with Lewis Walden. That's one of my favorite check-ins. Okay, so it looks like Corrine is going to premiere the show after this one. Wow, how about that? Let's see. People used to dress up. Yeah, people used to dress up, period, Robbie. You go back, but the airplane situation was a big deal. Like you wanted to look good when you got on an airplane. It's like he wanted to represent. It was a special experience. I agree with you. But people just dress better in general. I played the video of San Francisco in 1906 on Giuseppe's show on the 11th. And even the most raggedy people were wearing raggedy suits, but they were still suits. That went on. Renee up in the Great White North. Lauren Williams. Seeing lots of familiar names here. Greetings from UMP. Paulette Hanson. What's going on, Paulette? Sandra Duncan. This is a good crowd here tonight. Geometric Sphere. Universal Intelligence. Vancouver says hi. We shout back at you. Let's see. We used to go to Louisville Airport and watch the plane. Yeah, wasn't that cool, man? That was the thing to do. You used to watch the planes take off. You walk around the airport, maybe get a little airport food, which is not very good. It's better now. They've turned the airport food into an experience. A very expensive experience, but an experience. I don't eat airport food anymore. When I go to the airport, I generally don't eat airport food. I usually bring my own. The last time I went. Haven't done much traveling by plane recently. Gee, I wonder why. Who else do we have? We got a packed room. Miranda Couch, the intergalactic couch surfer, is here. There is my man, Masaki. Provocateur Astrologer is here. Kelly B, checking in. Ren Star, speaking of South Dakota. And who is this? Ravadison from Kentucky, SC. Wendy. Olympia Fonseca. Hi, Olympia. San Diego. My old, that's where my son was born. I actually like San Diego. Seer Guru. Look at that. Ryan getting a nice, warm welcome back. That's so cool. Blackman now, I think she's going free drinks on the plane. Yeah, some planes serve food. No matter how shitty the food was, you kind of liked it, right? Because it was airplane food. Hey, you never know what you're going to get. And just being on the airplane made the food better. It made the food better. Now you don't get airplane food unless you travel cross country. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because they have figured out that if you like, let's say, for instance, I was going to travel from California to New York, and it would be nonstop. And I think you might still be able to get, but they chop it up, right? They chop it up because if you fly, what is it, over 1,500 miles, they got to feed you. That's a rule, which is why all these planes have stopovers. They have stopovers because they don't want to feed your ass. Now you don't want the food anyway. It's going to be even worse, unless, of course, the World Economic Forum fascists get their way. In which case, everybody will be fed on probably not planes but trains. You'll get fed train food, and you'll get worm cakes and dried crickets and whatever other wonderful plant-based diets they have in charge for us. Okay, so it looks like we got our introductions in. Why don't we jump into this thing? And I think what I want to do is I want to play you a video first, just to kind of set the stage here. I just have to find it. It shouldn't be that hard, I don't think. Let's do this. It should just pop right up. Should just pop right up. Let's see what we got here. Right here. Right here. Oh, this is a better one right here. This is even better. All right. This is okay. So she's going to, okay. First of all, Harris is, she's in Europe and not Biden. That's significant. This is from 2 days ago. So she's on tour there. So let me play this. And I think I'll probably play another one. Although I can only take so many minutes of Kamala Harris. All right, so let's do this. Sound should be on. Why don't we maximize this? I guess we can maximize it. All right, let's hear what the second in command has to say.
Right now, we are obviously dealing with the concern about what is happening in Ukraine. As a member of NATO, we feel very strongly and will always be committed to the principle of territorial integrity and sovereignty. I am here to ensure that through our discussions and the discussions I will have with other of our allies, that we continue as these hours and days progress to stay in close contact. We understand this is a dynamic moment in time. And so the work that we are doing on a day basis and sometimes on an hourly basis to strengthen the relationship, to check in terms of our strategic imperatives, is critically important, and that is one of the reasons I am here. So I thank you again for all that you do and all that you have done. We remain, of course, open to and desirous of diplomacy as it relates to the dialogue and the discussions we have had with Russia. But we are also committed, if Russia takes aggressive action, to ensuring there will be severe consequence in terms of the economic sanctions we have discussed. And we know the alliance is strong in that regard. And again, I thank you for your leadership as a partner in that effort.
Well, the reality is that North America and Europe are doing more together now than have done for many years. That's important to deal with the aggressive actions of...
This guy's doing the Angela Merkel Trump thing.
Russia, but also to address a more competitive world, the security consequences of the rise of China. We have to stand together in North America and Europe. So again, thank you for your leadership, your commitment, and I look forward to our meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So what's interesting about this is that she's there and Biden isn't. That's significant. She is meeting with world leaders to discuss a world crisis. Let's do another one here. There's one I want to show here where she's rocking her S&M mask. It's right here. This is 54 seconds long. Right here, let's do this. Okay, now this mask looks like something out of like Batman or some kind of, underground BDSM party in San Francisco or DC. Check it out. Right? Does that look like this, this leather mask? I mean, it looks like a leather mask that you'd find at like an S&M hang. I swear to God. All right, let's see what she has to say here. All right, where's the video? Come on, hold on. There we go. Let's start. Every word here is critically important. Let's start from the beginning.
We're talking about the potential for war in Europe. I mean, let's really take a moment to understand the significance of what we're talking about.
Okay. Remember, this is Kamala Harris. This is not Joe Biden. Do you think Trump would have sent Mike Pence? First of all, Trump wouldn't have. I don't think Trump likes to travel. By and large, he never looked like he was ever having any fun when he traveled to these foreign countries. Like, I think Trump probably likes to travel to Mar-a-Lago, and that's maybe about it. Even still, if Trump would have gone, if this was a situation where Trump had to do something in a foreign country, they wouldn't have sent Mike Pence. They would have sent Donald Trump. Okay, so I'll stop talking and let's hear what she has to say.
It's been over 70 years. And through those 70 years, as I mentioned yesterday, there has been peace and security. We are talking about the real possibility of war in Europe. We would all, not just prefer, we desire, we believe, it is in the best interest of all that there is a diplomatic end to this moment. And so where do we want this to end? That is where we want it to end. We have agreed that the deterrence effect of these sanctions is still a meaningful one, especially because, remember also, we still sincerely hope that there is a diplomatic path out of this moment.
Okay. So, first of all, that's a CYA moment, right? Just in case they get involved in some kind of a slam dance that they want to have a CYA moment. Like, well, we tried to be diplomatic. And again, I'm not saying that Russia and the United States are these, polar opposite enemies. Again, how I look at this whole thing is that you have these various groups, including countries, and they're playing a script, and they are engaged in kind of a global drama. Now, that said, they can flip the script anytime they want. There's no reason why, let's say, Russia could go rogue. Russia could go rogue either way. Like, if they're gunning for this war and they're doing everything in their power to paint this picture and pump Russia up as being, the reincarnation of a specter or something like this, right? Russia could basically say, we're flipping the script and we're not taking the bait. We're not going to take the bait, which they've done in the past, by the way. They've not taken the bait in the past. And it's like they're left sort of holding the bag, right? Russia could flip the script in another way. And maybe it's supposed to look like a slightly limited thing, but Russia could just say, fuck it, fuck these guys. We're kind of tired of this little dance, this ring around the posy, and Klaus Schwab is playing Pan's flute in the center. Fuck it. If they really want to play around like this and script this thing out, let's give it to them, right? I mean, they could go in either direction, because we have entities that are connected to, I believe, one model for the planet, no matter who that entity is. And then number two, they could flip the script and say, screw it. We've got our own plan, because this is what gangs do. This is what gangs do. They will change. It's like, okay, well, we're supposed to go here, meet here. We're supposed to hash this out. And it's like, let's send somebody in there with a fucking machine gun. Right. So, we're dealing with a lot of variables here. Okay. But what Harris is being set up for is she's being set up to become a wartime president. And whether it's the aversion of a war, because as you could hear, she was promoting diplomacy, sanctions. So it would not be uncommon for somebody like Kamala Harris to be brought into a situation like that, be the face of the negotiation. Like, she can't lose at this point. She can't lose. So let's say, for instance, it's like the garbage truck strike and something's averted. Well, who's there? It's Kamala Harris, not Joe Biden. Who's going to get the win on that? It's Kamala Harris. If things go south and there is a limited conflict or full-on global conflict, who will be the wartime president? I guarantee you it will be Kamala Harris. That's what they're setting her up to do. Everything that I've seen with Harris's life, particularly from her time in San Francisco, seems absolutely destined. Absolutely destined. And Willie Brown, of course, plays a very strong role. So I'm going to kind of skip the chart of the moment, because we will be talking about the chart of the moment as it relates to a number of different things that we're going to get into here, particularly with Willie Brown and Kamala Harris and the Pluto return. So we're going to get into it, but we're going to focus it on a couple of people and this event that's coming up on Tuesday. All right. So the first stop we're going to make is Kamala Harris's chart. So we're going to look at her chart. We're going to look at some of her transits. That's the first stop we're going to make. So why don't I pull it up here, and you'll see her thing, right? Oops, there we go. Hold on. Let's do this. Okay, so here's her chart. So Kamala born 9:28 p.m., 10/20/64. So she is a dragon. She's a dragon lady. She fits the description. And she was born in Oakland, California. And I think eventually she goes to Canada and then migrates back to the United States. Gemini rising, there's her true node in the first house. What is Kamala Harris about? She's about Kamala Harris. That's how the true node works. Okay. If you have the true node in your first house and it's conjunct your ascendant, you are here to self-actualize. Every relationship in your life takes a backseat to self-actualization. Now, like a lot of people in that San Francisco scene, she's able to straddle two different worlds. She's able to straddle the world of the progressive party politique. Her office is in the Bayview district, which is near Hunters Point. Not a very happy place. You have a lot of drugs, you have a lot of crime, a lot of black on black crime. It's one of the, still to this day, I think Bayview, because they have a lot of projects there, one of the more impoverished areas of San Francisco. And again, characterized, certainly at that time, by a mostly black constituency. So that's where her office is. When I say office, she's like, running for DA. She's on all these like steering committees, and they have to do with the San Francisco Opera and the Museum of Modern Art. I mean, she gets in. And Willie Brown, by the way, is the person who gets her into all of these high society committees and groups. So she's hanging out with Charlotte Maillard Swig and the Swigs and Denise Hale and the Gettys and Gavin Newsom. San Francisco's high society. She's seen on Willie Brown's arm. We're going to look at her chart with Willie Brown, by the way, so you'll get a sense as to how that relationship works. But they take her in, and she's all over the society columns. She's one of she's. And the thing about Kamala Harris is that and I showed this on my show on Thursday, the Nob Hill Gazette has basically the movers and shakers of Pacific Heights and Nob Hill. And she is the only person that looks remotely black. And there's a picture of her and Willie Brown, which I'll show you. And you can barely tell she's black. I mean, she's shades lighter than Willie Brown. So in the case of San Francisco's high society, she is easily acceptable. Like they would never embrace somebody like Whoopi Goldberg, who, by the way, was from Berkeley and got her start in theater with the the Pierce Street Hawkeyes. I think that's what their name was, the Blake Street Hawkeyes. It was kind of a theater group and an improv group, and then she did a one-woman show on Mom's Mabley, and then she took off, right? But Whoopi Goldberg would never have been in the San Francisco high. They would not have embraced her. She's too black. She doesn't look the part. Kamala Harris looks the part. She's young. She's pretty. She's got a pretty good pedigree. Her father teaches at Stanford. Her mother is she's a researcher, a science medical researcher, and she's got a law degree. So, man, she fits the bill, right? Taken in. And Gemini on the ascendant represents like two different faces. Kamala Harris can be two-faced, right? I mean, literally, figuratively, she can wear two faces. She can go down to her office in the Bayview district and talk to people, and probably, what do they call it? There's a term for it when you change your accent. There's a specific term for it. I think it's called fronting or fake. I forget the name of it, but she could do that, right? She could go in and she could basically figure out how to talk like y'all down there. But then she goes to Pacific Heights, perfect English, perfect diction. And Gemini on the ascendant likes to move. When you have the true node right there on the ascendant, you're moving. You're always kind of on the move. Okay. So we've established that. Now we can see here that Black Moon Lilith is pretty much right in her ascendant. This is of 2/22/22, right? It's right there. 2/22/22. February 22nd, 2022. Black Moon Lilith is, so the dark moon is right there, right? So there is this kind of, some people say, well, that seems, very, very fatalistic, right? And the way that I work with Black Moon Lilith is with a woman, it's the shadow that's projected into the world. That's how I feel like Black Moon Lilith works with a woman. So if you have an unresolved issue, it's projected onto the world, and you have to deal with it vis-a-vis other people's reactions. They're not really dealing with you, they're dealing with the shadow, and usually it's something that's inherited or not necessarily resolved through your own mother, but it's projection onto the world. For men, it's different. For men, I believe it's their unresolved relationship with their mother. So it's not really projected unless it deals with other women, right? So it's I think Black Moon Lilith matters in terms of gender. If you're transgender, I don't know. I'm not going to go there. So it's interesting that Black Moon Lilith will be on her ascendant during this time, right? During this day that we're all talking about. Can she shift and turn into like this kind of dark image, right? Will she be this harbinger of something dark that we're going to experience? Will she have some kind of a weird scapegoat moment with Black Moon Lilith? We're going to project onto her and either, now, by the way, this could go either way. It could either go failure or victory. It could, because we're talking about Gemini here, right? And Gemini is sort of bipolar. So it could go either way. I mean, it could be projected on her like, oh, look, you've saved the day. So Harris has Saturn in Aquarius. So here we see Aquarius right now transiting her chart. Her Saturn's at 28 degrees. She's got a lot of later degree planets. Like her sun is at 27 Libra. She's born on a full moon. And she has a war moon. Her moon is in Aries. And so again, it's weird because she has this Libran kind of persona in some ways with her sun in Libra. But on the other side, she's got this, very hot. When I say hot, I'm not talking about like, oh, she's hot. I'm talking about hot in terms of temper. Also, Aries is a sign that's related to instant gratification. Whether it's sun, you'll really see it with Venus and Aries. And so anywhere you line up with the inner planets with Aries, it's all about now, 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 now. So she's got moon in Aries, and especially it's full. And a lot of times when people have a full moon in their chart, it's a lifetime of kind of culmination, right? Like it's theoretically their time to shine. And she's got an Aries full moon, and we're dealing with a war situation. It's right at the end. And again, my philosophy with those 2 degrees, 27 and 28 in any sign, is that the degrees of those planets are erratic. They're super erratic, and the energy is hard to control. And the reason why is because the sign is moving towards the 29th degree, which is anoretic, and it just flatlines. There's nothing left. And then at 0 degrees, it is reborn into the next sign, and it's at its most potent. So, the most common analogy that I would use at 27, 28 is like a supernova. And the idea of the supernova is that the energy is all over the place, right? It's like big and it kind of flames out, and then it goes to this kind of black hole, which is the 29th degree. And then we go into the next sign. And I've used a couple of examples of this, but one of my favorite examples is on a kind of a mundane level with somebody that you would be familiar with is Bill Murray. And Bill Murray is a 28 degree Virgo, and he's all over the place, right? Bill Murray is like, just go back and watch him with some of those Pebble Beach tournaments. He's like uncontrollable, and they love him for it. He's kind of crazy, spontaneous. He comes out of Second City, which is an improv group, and he's really good at it, right? He shows up at people's weddings. Like there's a dark side to Bill Murray, but that's the degree that I'm talking about. And even if you go back and look at Fukushima, I think one of the outer planets, it might have been, what was it? I think it might have been either Uranus or it was either Uranus or Neptune. They both changed right around Fukushima, and they were both at like 29, 28. And you could see that volatility. I think they both were sort of very close, but you could see that volatility with, I believe it was Uranus, if I'm not mistaken, at 28 Pisces, getting ready to move into Aries. So she's got a lot of these kind of volatile. Her sun is at 27 Libra, which puts it in what we call the Via Combusta, which is the burning path. And I think it's like 24 Libra to, what is it, 13 Scorpio, right around there. Supposedly it has to do with the burning off of this dross. So if you have planets somewhere in that spectrum, I think it's like 23 to 14, like whatever you have, you kind of burn through it, right? So you learn and burn. And she's got the sun right there at 27. So that's part of the Via Combu. So she's going to be this character that goes through these kind of very intense moments in time. Like I did a chart one time of her and Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi Gabbard's way over here, right? Tulsi Gabbard's in Aries. And I think they're almost exactly opposite. So Tulsi Gabbard took her through the Via Combusta and just completely torched her during that presidential debate. That's kind of that's actually an example of it. That is an example of it. She has Mercury conjunct her sun in Scorpio. So she's very shrewd. This is a super shrewd woman. She's very, she's very clever. She understands power through Mercury. That's how she understands power. And, I've talked about a little bit about what they call Promethean Mercury and Epithean Mercury. Promethean Mercury is when the sun is in front of Mercury. So that means that the individual will throw themselves into an experience, and then they will take the experience and they will process it mentally. So that would be what I would call that's the Promethean Mercury. Epithean Mercury is when Mercury is ahead of the sun, and people that have Epithean Mercury will take information in, they will calculate what they are going to do, and then they will act. So there's a significant difference in terms of where Mercury is in a chart. So she's going to be extremely scorpionic. She's going to read the room, and then she's going to adjust her sails accordingly with that Libra sun. So she's going to get noticed. She's with the moon in Aries. It's about power, and it's about Aries is a power sign. And she's going to use her power or connect with power through her femininity, which is the moon. All right. So she's got this Saturn conjunct her midheaven. It's kind of a big aspect in her chart and an important one, because she's got that Sun Saturn trine. That's a very significant aspect. And Saturn conjunct the midheaven is typically what we'd call fated. It's like, okay, this person is meant to do something at a very specific time in their life. So the last time Saturn was there was in 1991. No, a little bit later than that. It would have been around 94, if I'm not mistaken. Saturn goes into Pisces, I think in 94. So right around 1994. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's when she runs for DA in San Francisco. Let me just see here really quickly, because this is kind of an important tale to tell with Harris and Saturn. So let me just look up this really quickly so I can back this up. Okay. Let's find out. In 1994, Speaker of the California Assembly, Willie Brown, who was then dating Harris, appointed her to the State Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board and later to the California Medical Assistance Commission. Harris took a 6-month leave of absence in 1994 from her duties. Afterward, resumed as prosecutor during the years that she sat on the boards. So essentially what she did, again, who could get away with this? She takes a 6-month leave of absence as a prosecutor. She's the DA from Oakland. She meets Willie Brown in 1994. Hello, Saturn, right? The older dude. And she takes 6 months off to go hang out and understand theoretically what she's supposed to do with these boards and these commissions, which are, I think, made up, by the way. I think he made them up. Then she comes back and she serves out the rest of her term as DA while also being on these commissions. So she's double dipping. She's getting a DA salary and she's also getting, I think she made, what was it, $400,000 over 5 years from being on those commissions. So she's, making very decent money. This is by the way, this is 1994 money. So she's making probably around, let's say, $85,000 from those commissions. And her DA salary, I'm guessing, probably pays her in 1994 money, maybe around 80 grand. So she's probably taking in about $165,000 a year. And Willie Brown buys her a brand new BMW, so she doesn't have a car payment. So that's where Saturn comes in, right there in 1994. Boom. So in February of 1998, Hallinan recruited Harris as assistant district attorney. Worst thing he could have ever done, by the way, because she uses information about Terrence Hallinan against him in order to get elected. But that Saturn conjunction is when her political career takes off. See how this works? Okay. So let's go back here. Okay. So her Saturn, as we can see, is at 28 Aquarius. Again, one of those crazy numbers at the end of that sign or a sign. So even though it's the highest planet in her chart, even though it's conjuncting the midheaven, which is the gateway to the 10th house, which is the rulership for Saturn. Saturn once was, by the way, the ruler of Aquarius. So she's kind of getting it a little bit both ways here. With from an astrological standpoint, it's kind of a win-win for her. Now, where is Saturn currently? Okay, so Saturn currently is at what, 19? Is it? Let me just zoom in a little bit here. So we have Saturn at, let's see, 18 Aquarius. Okay, 18. So, and by the way, her Saturn is retrograde, which is, again, when you look at the primaries, and she is one of the least popular candidates. She's finishing in the lower 1% of the primaries. And there's this retrograde thing, even though she's toast. You can't get rid of her. It's like, okay, well, could retrograde express itself here? Like, you're done. Oh, no, you're not. You're coming back. Right, you're coming back. This could be another definition of retrograde. But I guarantee you, by the time she goes through her Saturn return, her second Saturn return, she will be president of the United States. You can see it. It's right here, and she has, again, these kind of faded moments. And Brown is, I would say, faded in a lot of ways. Look. So here she is. She's on the inside. And look at all these planets now. We're talking about on the 22nd, Mars, Pluto, there's Vesta, there's Venus, there's that Mars-Venus conjunction. It's in her 8th house, which is power behind the scenes. Very significant power behind the scenes. Something is brewing in her 8th house. And look at over here, she has Jupiter, right? She has Jupiter in her natal 12th house, which is it conjunct Algol? It's pretty close. Again, it's retrograde. It's like good fortune in a strange way coming back. Look at that true node. It is getting ready to get to conjunct Jupiter in her 12th house. What would we call that? That's luck, good fortune, expansion. And these forces now are hidden, right? We can't see them. So we have essentially Mars, Venus, and Pluto. They're all trining in with her Jupiter. This is a big power play. It's all behind the scenes. All of it's behind the scenes. And if you look at the true node here, the true node is beginning to rise. So it is rising in her chart. I hate to say it, but we may be seeing Kamala Harris for a while. Now, there could be something that might derail all of this. This is the Neptune-Pluto opposition. Now, Harris, let me just zoom back in here. So Harris has Pluto and Virgo at 15 degrees. She's already past that. She's already past that. The Neptune-Pluto opposition, I think, was much closer to the primaries in 2020. I think Pluto was right around 17, 18, right around there. And usually the Neptune-Pluto opposition, you have to let go of something that's really important. I've talked about this before. She got through it. She got through the Neptune-Pluto opposition. This is why when you see somebody like this who has these things that are happening to them, there's kind of this fated quality in a lot of ways to her chart. And I think the fated, I hate to use the word fated, maybe destined, it might be a better one. It's Saturn. Like if you were somebody who was, let's say for instance, she's hanging out with the hoi polloi of San Francisco, the movers and the shakers. Don't think that these people don't consult astrologers. They do. And let's say, for instance, Denise Hale or Charlotte Maillard Swig sat down with an astrologer and they looked at Kamala Harris's chart, and an astrologer saw that Saturn on the midheaven. What do you think that astrologer would tell them? Especially with the sun trine to Saturn here, a sun trine to the midheaven, double thumbs up. That she would get a double thumbs up. I guarantee you, from an astrologer. She's got Mars in Leo, which again, what do you see in the chart? Okay, she's got Moon at 27 Aries, and her Mars is at 21 Leo. She's got a Mars Moon trine, so she's going to be very passionate, very vivacious. She has a lot of energy. She has a lot of charisma. No matter what you think of Kamala Harris, if you go back, because the person we see now is kind of a caricature, but if you go back to that time when she was, being forged in that Pacific Heights period, she has a lot of charisma. And especially around these people that are preening and fawning all over her. And it's like, oh, look, we have somebody exotic amongst us. And guess what? She's kind of one of us. Her father teaches at Stanford. Her mother's a research scientist. She grew up in Canada a little bit there. She got her law degree from Hastings. She's one of us. Or maybe it might have been Bolt. I think she went to Berkeley. So what was Berkeley? Berkeley's Bolt, if I'm not mistaken. If they were an astrologer, if they consulted an astrologer would, like thumbs up. She's got a destiny to fulfill. So everything would kind of align itself, not kind of, most things would align itself around that. And again, look at the fact that she did so shitty on the campaign trail, and she still winds up being vice president. To me, this has a lot to do with Saturn. And then we have the Saturn conjunction with Vesta. And Vesta is in Pisces. She also has Chiron in Pisces in the 10th house. That's an interesting placement for Chiron. She had that big gaffe about the whole thing with getting high in school and listening to Snoop. Like, Snoop wasn't around when she was in school. Snoop and Tupac weren't around. Sorry, that wasn't happening. Tupac doesn't hit the hip hop scene until 1990, 1991, around 91, 90. By that time, she's already the DA in Oakland. And I think he starts off as a dancer for Digital Underground. He was a dancer. He was a stage dancer for Digital Underground. And eventually they let him start to rhyme. And then I think he leaves and he takes off with the DJ from Digital Underground. I think they do their own record. What are you doing over there? Did you catch a mouse? Anyway. So there's no way she could have done that, but that's Chiron in the 10th house in Pisces. Oh yeah, I used to get high, listen to Snoop and Pac when I was in college. No, you didn't. You didn't. You were lying. The other thing with Chiron and Pisces in the 10th house, you go back and look at a lot of those pictures with her in San Francisco. She's always got a fucking glass of wine in her hand. So that's pretty evident in the 10th house. There's also there's a lot of scapegoat energy with Chiron and Pisces. And here comes Jupiter, though. Like, to me, this is good fortune. With the Jupiter Chiron conjunction coming in, trining Neptune in her chart. She's got that Neptune in Scorpio. And boom, on the 22nd, there's the moon in Scorpio. Trining Chiron, transiting Jupiter. Astrologically, I would say what you're looking at, for the most part here, I'd say 90%, this is Kamala's time. She is lined up astrologically for the next 3 days. And there's no coincidence that she is there. The one thing, there's a couple things here that I think could be kind of awkward. And that is the Sun-Mercury square to what's going with Pluto, Mars, and Venus. That she might be a little bit over her head with those squares. She also may have to agree to certain things. Because remember, the 8th house has to do with this underworld and other people's money. And there's a lot of very powerful elite influence that's cruising through her 8th house. And she'll be the beneficiary of it with Jupiter, but with her sun, there are things that she's going to have to sacrifice in a lot of ways. And I don't know really what those things are. Agreements, quite possibly. These planets are in conflict with her sun. What's interesting about Harris is that full moon in Aries, where she draws a lot of conflict. And people don't like her. I mean, they just don't like her. And even now, because her moon is at this late degree, she's got Pluto squaring her moon. She's got Mars squaring her moon. She's got Venus squaring. This is fuck up energy. And this is pretty much completing a T-square. So she's got these things that are happening in her chart that feel very fated, and there's the beneficiary of things going on behind the scenes. But there's also an incredible amount of stress and tension and pressure coming from here to here and here to here. So the next 48 hours is going to be very interesting with Kamala Harris. And a lot of this is going to be behind the scenes. And she's going to have serious meetings there in Europe with these people that are coming from a very different place. She was over her head when she went to, what was it? Was it El Salvador or some Guatemala? Like she was, my nose itches tonight. I don't know why. Is it somebody talking about you with your nose or something like that? Anyway, she was way overhead when she was south of the border. Now, Europe, there's a lot of protocol. There's a lot of, I think she could get by fairly well in Europe with her Libra sun. But Europe's also very, very dark. And Europe has a lot of very old, eyes wide shut kind of energy. You know what I mean? Very old, eyes wide shut. We're talking Black families, Venetian families, people that basically flip scripts and run resets. That's who she's dealing with over there. And as much as you see here with all those pawns in that room, that's not who she's really dealing with. She's dealing with these people that are behind the scenes. And there are certain things that they're going to propose to her over the course of the next 72 hours, maybe the next 24 hours, because she may come back. But this is something pretty significant happening in her chart. The other thing that's going on here is this inconjunct with Mars in her chart, which is, I think, troublesome, because we're also dealing with, let's see, Neptune is at what? Her Mars is at 23, is that right? 21, and Neptune is at 21, 22. So Neptune, Mars, Neptune in conjunct. So I feel like she'll either come out manufactured as a hero with this Neptune Mars in conjunct, or if this thing goes south, she could be blamed for what happens. Again, when we're looking at Black Moon Lilith on the ascendant in Gemini, it doesn't really matter in some ways because it could go either way. This is a very interesting chart of somebody who I feel like in some ways is at a crossroads. I think she is at a crossroads. You don't see the Grand Cross here, but there are forces that are influencing her. What are the other things going on here? Okay, so Venus is, what do we got? Capricorn, and then Mars Capricorn. So this is on, right. So they're right there. Now remember, on March 2nd, they both conjunct Pluto on March 2nd. So right now, Venus and Mars are in conjunct with her own Mars. The Venus in conjunct, to me, represents contracts, deals, relationships. And Mars is the power kind of behind the scenes here. This is very interesting just in terms of her chart. And so we are looking at a yod right now. If we were adding, God, please forgive me for doing this thing with my nose. It's totally itchy. I don't know what you do to stop an itchy nose. I think I have a nose spray around here. It's my nose spray. Maybe I can use a nose spray in my nose. Oh, it's right here. See if that helps. Nose spray to the rescue. See what happens. It's the first time I've ever sprayed my nose on YouTube. Let's see. I don't know if it'll help my itching, but I sure got a rush off that. Yeah, man, there's a lot going on here. Part of fortune, sun, Jupiter, everything is moving into her 10th house. Big moment, big time, big sacrifice. Big sacrifice. And there's a lot of power aspects here with this moon in Scorpio, conjuncting her Neptune, going right up to the top, trining Jupiter. Wow. Very interesting. even transiting Saturn in conjunct Pluto and Uranus and Venus in her chart. She's got, oh boy, she would not be fun to be around. Maybe for a little bit, but that Venus Pluto Uranus conjunction in Virgo, wow. Venus in Virgo has super high standards, but with Uranus there, that could flip. She might be able to put those super high standards aside and go, I'm in it for the money. I'm in it for the money, honey. Anyway, this is a pivotal time for her. Again, I'm going to go on record. I believe she will be president before Biden's term is over. When Saturn gets within about a 5-degree orb of her natal Saturn, and I think Saturn gets to 24 this year, 25 this year. So theoretically, she could become president this year. Buddy Gage, or Buddy, whatever his name is, he's a Capricorn, and she should watch out for him. She should watch out for him. His sun is in her 8th house. Palace intrigue. All right. There's Kamala Harris. And again, the 9th house is travel overseas. She has Saturn there. She's got Mercury conjuncting Juno in her 9th house, new opportunities, communicating with the global media. Kind of her time. Although, again, some of those aspects there, it's a precarious balance, and it feels to me like she will make some decisions and sacrifices that could have long-reaching terms and consequences for both her and a lot of other people. All right, so let's look at her Sinistry chart with Willie Brown. I'll give you a quick rundown of Willie Brown's chart. Pretty simple. Well, it's not really totally that simple, but he's Libra rising, Jupiter on the ascendant. As you'll see, Kamala Harris's sun will be in a wide conjunction with Jupiter, and plays itself out pretty much perfectly with his chart and Sinistry. You'll see this. Willie Brown, in spite of what you think, he came from really humble means in Mineola, Texas. He worked his fucking ass off. Like, he worked extremely hard. He was a janitor, a shoe salesman, whatever Willie Brown needed to do in order to get ahead, he did it. He even learned how to be a dental hygienist, which I think is interesting because Aries rules the head and the teeth, and he's got Mars in the 8th house. He learned how to be a dental hygienist through, I think it was the California State Guard or some shit like that. I think it has something to do with getting out of the war. He was in ROTC. I think he realized that if he stayed in ROTC, he could probably be drafted. So then he went in, I swear to God, this is what he did. Then he got into the California State Guard, which is what Bush did with Texas, by the way. And he learned how to become a dental hygienist. There's your Mars in the 6th house, which is health and healing, dealing with teeth. He's an interesting character, no doubt. His moon, remember, Harris has that Gemini rising. So his moon would be on her ascendant. She would be tapping into him, right? She'd be tapping into him. Well, let me see. He'd be tapping into her through her feminine wiles. And Willie's a switch hitter, by the way. So her, that would work well because there's a strange connection with his moon, her true node, and her ascendant. Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. He was getting something out of it, obviously. But Willie's got some weird stuff going on here. Venus, true node, in Aquarius, Saturn. And he always dated younger women. So you can see that Venus-Saturn conjunction. And when so they both have Saturn, by the way, in Aquarius, which is, you'll see that in their charts. So when Brown appoints her to be on these boards, he's going through his 2nd Saturn return, which is interesting. She's getting ready to go through her 1st. Saturn's already up in her 9th house. you'll see all this play out. And her Mars, which is at 21 Leo, is conjunct his south node. What I think is interesting about this is he has unfinished business with her from another lifetime. That's that Mars south node conjunction. And I think in a lot of ways he has some, I hate to use the word karma. I don't like that word, but he has something to finish out with her and help her fulfill something. So for instance, let's say it's Palace Intrigue, which is the South Node in Leo. And that's where Brown had come from. South Node and Leo, kind of been there, done that. So what he's here to do is build coalitions, which he does kind of incredibly well. No matter what you think of the guy, he's a master builder of coalitions. I could see the South Node here, and you'll see it on the charts when they're together, that he probably fucked her over in one of these past lives. Like he stuck a knife in her back with Mars. Like he fucked her over in some court intrigue deal. And so he has to compensate for that in this lifetime. It's like, okay, all right, I did it then. I'm gonna have to take care of you now. You'll see this. I think it's really interesting. He also has Uranus in Aries, and it's right around the same degree as her moon. So they form this very quick alliance. And they're only together for about, I think, roughly, I think it's around 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. It's as soon as Brown gets elected mayor, they break up. It's like now she's kind of on her own. She's doing her own thing. She's going to become DA. She's going to take on Hallinan, who's one of Brown's buddies, by the way, one of his longtime buddies. So, okay, so let's bring in the Sinistry chart between the two of them, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's really, to me, it's like it's super fascinating. Super, okay, so we got that. Okay, where's their Sinistry chart? Always do this. I always have one chart that, okay, there it is. Good. Excellent. Found it. So here we go. You can see where it all plays out. Brown has Uranus in the 7th house. He has weird relationships. He was still married when he started dating Kamala Harris. He has weird relationships. And I talked about this on my show on Thursday. And for those of you who don't watch the daily shows, I used to do tarot readings, a lot of tarot readings in the Bay Area, and it would connect me with some very interesting people sometimes. So there was this woman, and I went to her apartment twice, and she was probably, I don't know, maybe in her early 50s. Nice person, super nice person. And I went over to her apartment twice to do these tarot readings. And I remember the first time I went there, she told me that Willie Brown lived on the same floor. And this was a pretty nice apartment building in Nob Hill, sort of kind of right at the edge of Pacific Heights. And this is where he lived. So she would see him come home at night sometimes, as she'd walk in and Willie Brown would come in, and she said that Willie Brown would bring these young Asian guys home. Like, I think they were Thai. Those are from her lips. Okay. So this is one of my clients. And I was like, oh, that's kind of juicy. So Willie Brown's got interesting things going on. He's got Uranus in the 7th house. He's got Venus and the true node in Aquarius. He has the sextile with Uranus. So I think Willie could be pretty fluid. He's got these strange timing things going on with women. He's had children with women. He's got kids. And here's this Uranus moon conjunction. So Obviously, there's some degree of chemistry. It happens fast. It ends fast. Maybe 2 years max. But during those 2 years, he is instrumental in launching her into San Francisco high society. So there's his Jupiter, there's her sun within a conjunction. So she's really tapping into his ability to open doors for her. We can also see what I was talking about here with this Mars conjunction with the South Node. He's got something to deal with her. Like there's a reason why I think he's promoting her for a number of different reasons. Number one, he's going to run for mayor because he's getting run out of the state assembly. He's too powerful. They do term limits. And I think having somebody like Kamala Harris around, who is young and attractive, does a lot for his image. They have this strange chemistry here with Uranus moon conjunction. Like she fits in a weird way with his world. And then there's the payback. And they have this Venus Mars opposition, which is really, again, kind of strange. Usually with Venus Mars, I would say she dominates him. She's got the dominating energy in the relationship. He's not the one that is, he's not the one that's running the power in a lot of ways. She's the one that's running the power. And Leo it's super dominant on his South Node. And it's in his 11th house. So he's bringing her into the 11th house, the social scene. And she's full charge straight ahead. And then over here, still in the 11th house, Pluto Venus conjuncting his Neptune. So she's tapping in. She's tapping into his Neptune, which is lots of possibility. In a lot, people have Neptune in the 11th house, have a lot of very interesting friends. And again, with Brown, it'll run the gamut. It'll run the gamut with Brown. High society to, some, young tranny, Thai tranny somewhere, right? That's Willie Brown, Neptune. And she's privy to all of it, with Pluto and Venus here. So it's a very interesting chart. Jupiter conjunct the vertex in his chart. And the vertex being the second ascendant. She's tapping right in. She's tapping right into his power base. She's tapping in ultimately to the same money the same money group that would fund Willie Brown's elections. Same money base. Other people's money. She's tapping right into it. It's a very interesting chart. You can see where their Saturns are very close together. So he's going through his second Saturn return. She's going through her first Saturn return. It's all pretty much coming together here for her, because as we saw in her chart with her first Saturn return, that's when she meets him, and that's when she gets appointed to all these boards. This is a very interesting synastry chart. There's some complexity. The Venus Mars, like a Venus Mars opposite here, they're never meant to be together ultimately long term. If you're paying attention at home, you want to keep score. What you want to look for in a synastry chart, Venus Mars conjunction. Chemistry off the charts, literally off the charts. So this is a fascinating chart. There's tension also here, because there's even this moment. I read this article. It's a super interesting article. And it's when Kamala Harris takes on Terrence Hallinan and this other guy, that's mostly Terrence Hallinan. And it's one of her first debates. And Willie Brown is there for it. And essentially what she does is she accuses Terrence Hallinan of fucking on his desk while he's working, which, by the way, is probably true. Remember, she's the assistant district attorney. Willie Brown would have never done that. That is just not his style. He's got a Libra rising. He's got Jupiter there. He is slick fucking Willie. Doors open for him because he is the consummate deal maker. He's got Venus in Aquarius, true node in Aquarius, Venus Saturn conjunction. He's a coalition builder. What is she? No way. Mars and Leo, she's going in for the kill and takes out Terrence Hallinan in the same way, in a lot of ways, later on, that Tulsi Gabbard would do to her during the presidential primaries. But I think that Harris, because of her chart, because of a lot of those connections she made in San Francisco, by the way, big time, powerful connections with people like the Gettys and people like Nancy Pelosi and the Pelosi's. And a lot of people you don't know, they are behind her. They're not the only people behind her, but they are behind her. And these people have a lot of cash, a lot of influence, and a lot of power. So here we go. It's the Kamala show. And we can see how she was launched by this guy right here. If I were to flip this, you would see his moon conjunct her ascendant. So they're both using each other in a lot of ways. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating synergy. And we have Willie Brown to thank for it. We have Willie Brown to thank. It's interesting. Could Kamala, here's the question. Could Kamala have risen to power without Willie Brown? It's an interest. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I do think that Willie Brown made it a hell of a lot easier. This chart may have played out in its own way. But Willie Brown he is the guy that is the doorman. He is the gatekeeper that opens her to power, money, and influence. He gets something out of the deal, obviously. I mean, we all know the stories, right? Which are probably not untrue. But it's a very quick relationship, and it is literally a slingshot for her into this arc of power and influence. Very interesting stuff. Super interesting. Could she have done it on her own? Maybe. But it's that Mars South Node conjunction, the court intrigue, the dagger in the back from another time, where I think he feels responsible, and he's going to open the gateway of the 11th house for her Mars, where she will become active, and she'll run that Leo solar energy through his 11th house. Okay. So what do we want here? All right. So let's look at the US return, United States return. So what time did I start? 8 o'clock. What did I say? 8:20. All right. We're going to go for 2 hours tonight because I did enough last week for like 2 fucking shows. So I could have skipped this week theoretically, but there's so much going on that we can't do that. I wouldn't do it to you. Okay. So let's look at the solar return or the Pluto return. And look, there's a lot of debate between sidereal and Placidus. Now, I'm a Placidus guy only because I was introduced to it, and it's been a hell of a map for me for the last, since, what was it, Jasper? 2009? 2009? We'll say 2009. 2008, really. Since 2008, when I started to do astrology pretty much full time. So, do the math. That's what 2008, 2020, 10, so 2018 would be 10 years. So we're talking about 14 years. I've been doing this for 14, almost 15 fucking years next year. It's a long time. Anyway, Placidus has been pretty good for me. I don't think there's any harm in understanding sidereal, but if you watch the Friday Forecast by the way, check out the Friday Forecast with Hadi McCoskey. It's a great show. We talk a little bit about this, so I probably won't go over a lot of it. Just go watch the show. And Howdy was in top form. I mean, he was really in top form. And by the end of the show, he's really dropping into this incredibly soulful place. And I had an opportunity to look at Howdy's chart after the show. He's a Pisces, and he has a a moon. He's got a moon Neptune conjunction in Scorpio. That's all I'm going to say. But his moon, you could really feel his moon, his sun moon trine in his chart by the end of the show, because he really dropped in this very, very soulful place. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the sidereal Placidus thing too much, but we're using Placidus, right? So we're looking at 27 degrees as the Jupiter return. I'm sorry, the Pluto return. Some people say, well, it's 2024. It's like, yeah, really. So I'll give you a little insight into the story here, okay, of the United States chart. Apparently, there was a rush to get this started. There was a rush to get the party started. And Ben Franklin, who was, as we know, an esotericist, an occultist, could have been a lot more than that too. There was a very dark side to Ben Franklin. But he was very keen and aware of astrology. And he did not want the United States moon to be in the sign of, guess what? Capricorn. He didn't want it in Capricorn. He wanted it in Aquarius. Why is that? Well, because Ben Franklin and a lot of the quote unquote founding fathers, they were students, acolytes, followers of Sir Francis Bacon. And Bacon wrote a work on the New Atlantis. And Franklin saw the United States as the New Atlantis. And in order for it to cohere to the description of the New Atlantis, the moon would have to be in the sign of Aquarius. You don't get Atlantis in Capricorn. What do you get in Capricorn? You get the monarchy. That's what Capricorn's about. It's about the monarchy. It's about hierarchical structures of power. So for all you people out there that are looking at the sidereal version of this chart, the moon wouldn't be in Aquarius, be in a completely different sign. So, you know, wrap your head around that. Okay. The moon would not be in Aquarius. And if it was in Aquarius, it would be in a different position. Wouldn't be at that degree. Okay. So here we go. So we have the moon in Aquarius, and then there's Pallas, which is also quite interesting. And it aligns with Saturn in the 10th house. So there's a moon Saturn trine. And again, I think Franklin saw this. Or this moon Saturn trine. Saturn is exalted in Libra. It's in the 10th house. And theoretically, this would give some longevity to the country, right? But we would go through trials and tribulations when Pluto would make a transit to that Saturn in the US chart. So that Saturn's at 14. You go back, and I think, where was Pluto at 14 degrees? I think it was at right around 2015, right around there. Was it 2014, 2015? Right around there, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a pretty intense time. That's, by the way, I think when Black Lives, it's all that second term, all the Black Lives Matter stuff starts to surface in second term Obama. And I believe that's when you see the Pluto-Saturn square start to take place. And the US sun is at 13 Cancer. So right around that time, there's this Pluto-Sun opposition happening. So that period, right around 2014, 2015, Pluto's really kicking into gear. And we're starting to feel a lot of tension in the country during that time, which hasn't abated, by the way. Anyway, let's talk about the Pluto return. So we're seeing this Pluto return happen at 27 degrees. And here we are. I mean, this is the day. This is 2/22/22. We've got these war drums beating theoretically in Ukraine and Russia. We have Kamala Harris overseas with her BDSM mask and taking charge. And we have some stuff going on with the economy. the second house is economical and it's hard assets. Now, I posted something on Twitter, came through Forbes magazine, and they're saber rattling about interest rates. Well, in order to deal with inflation, well, we'll just raise the interest. They did this in the 70s. And it was a freaking nightmare in the 70s. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, we'll just raise interest rates because we don't want the price of goods going up. It was crazy. Really, what they were doing, I'll tell you right now, what they were doing in the 70s, which is an absolute crime, is they were starting the evolution of globalism in the 90s. So you began to see offshoring in the 1970s, but there was still a lot of people who had automobile jobs, manufacturing jobs. There were a lot of manufacturing jobs in the country. And what they didn't want is they didn't want people to get cheap money during the 1970s. So Paul Volcker ratchets up the prime lending rate. I think it was like crazy. It was like somewhere between 15 and 20%. And what they were doing is they were keeping the middle class from getting cheap money. So they could go out and buy property, they could expand their businesses. And if you were wealthy, you could obviously afford to get money at 15%. And then you could, dominate while everybody else was sort of flatlining. And the 70s are kind of fucked. They're kind of fucked because of that. So they can do that. They can theoretically raise it. Now, somebody said that they wouldn't do it because you can't expand a black hole. Now, that's true to some extent. The black hole being this idea of the fiat debt, which is the ultimate black hole now, swallowing everything, right? Swallowing everything in its path. Now, that said, we have to talk about BlackRock, which is what? We think of BlackRock, we think of Saturn. We think of the Saturnian cube with BlackRock. We think of the meteorite or whatever it is that fell from the sky at some point, which was, the rumor has it that that's the beginning of the Gnostic error, right? It's the Gnostic error, and this the archons are embedded in the black goo of the black rock, and if you look around the world and you'll see all these black cubes. They're everywhere. Of course, the one that is the most prominent is in Saudi Arabia at Mecca and the Kaaba, which is the mother of all black cubes. These black cubes are everywhere, right? That's black rock. Black rock is the black Saturn cube. Now, black rock has initiated something called ESG. You may ask yourself, what is ESG? Well, we're going to look at ESG. It's right here. Here we go. ESG. This is BlackRock's little baby right here. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Investors are increasingly applying these non-financial factors as part of their analysis process to identify material risks and growth opportunities. This guide takes fiduciary duty, externalities, disclosure, and other important ESG into account. So BlackRock is the one that is running this ESG program. So let's just take a look at this. What are the common investor objectives? When it comes to ESG investing, one size does not fit all. Under the ESG investing umbrella, we have identified 3 common investor objectives or motivations when considering an ESG strategy: integration, values, and impact. In order to achieve these objectives, investors may pursue different approaches, such as ESG integration, exclusionary or negative screening, or thematic investing, to name a few. Here we share the differences between socially responsible, SRI, values-based investing, impact investing, and other commonly used terms in the market. So we have bottom-up ESG integration, investing with a systematic and explicit inclusion of ESG takes risks and opportunities and investment analysis. Thematic investing, active ownership, top-down ESG. So this is bottom-up integration and top-down ESG. Why is ESG growth accelerating? Global sustainability challenges, such as flood risk and rising sea levels, privacy and data security, demographic shifts, and regulatory pressures are introducing new risk factors for investors that may not have been seen previously. So for instance, if you hire based on meritocracy, which is the best person who's supposed to be available for the job, and that meritocracy looks surprisingly white and surprisingly male, guess what? That's a risk factor. That is a risk factor. Why? Your company is at risk for not looking progressive enough. Oh, yeah, that's true. That is true. If your company is not green enough, that's a risk. So what they're doing now is they're redefining what risk is. So ESG comes in and it factors all these things in. So what you want to do is you want to have the lowest risk, right? So if you have the lowest risk, that means you're going to have a high ESG rating, which means that, guess what? You're available for money. You're going to get good money. You might get cheaper money than other people. Why? Because BlackRock is controlling the cash flow. They sit right between the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department. So if you don't think interest rates can go up to 10, 14, 15, and 25%, you're mistaken. You know why? Because ESG can kick in. And if you're meeting this criterion, guess what? Your rates are lower. So what does that do? It forces everybody else who's not into this to play ball. Global challenges such as climate risk, increased regulatory pressures, social and demographic shifts, in privacy and data security concerns represent new or increasing risks for investors. The economic pressure the COVID-19 pandemic has placed on some industries has affected companies' exposure to ESG risks and their ability to manage them. Companies face rising complexities and greater scrutiny if they are not adequately managed or managing their ESG or climate risk. You see this? You see this? The interest from millennial investors around the world has already helped drive rapid growth in ESG investment. In a 2018 survey, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, said that they could conservatively estimate USD 20 trillion of assets growth in US domiciled ESG funds alone for the next 2 decades. Look at the demographics here. Look who's showing up. Okay, we have this person, indeterminate. This person is a woman. They're both women, indeterminate. She looks slightly Asian. Advanced technology, including artificial intelligence and alternative data extraction techniques, help minimize our reliance on voluntary disclosure. So basically what they're saying is you plug in AI and you have alternative data extraction and you become transparent, we don't have to worry about you. Because everything we're seeing right into your company by using these third-party clients that now everybody is using because they want to be compliant with ESG. Oh, guess what? Whatever product you're making over here, it's not ecologically sound. You get a little bit of a demerit and your chance of getting some good, cheap ESG money, maybe not so much next time. Machine learning and natural language processing help us increase the timelines and precision of data collection, analysis, and validation to deliver dynamic content. Dive into ESG. Ooh, doesn't sound like fucking fun. Foundations of ESG investing. Read more. Deconstructing ESG ratings. ESG funds in focus. The transparency tools I was just talking about. Ratings and climate search tools. Search ratings. ESG industrial industry material. So I'm showing this to you because they could raise interest rates and link it to something like ESG. And it's kind of like the social credit score for businesses. In the meantime, what does that do to everybody else? Right? Well, if they link ESG, which they are increasingly more because BlackRock is demanding, I'll just show you. Here. This is right now, this is BlackRock's bedrock. I'll agree to your fucking cookies, BlackRock. I don't care. I'm taking one for the team. Oh, let's see what we have here. Yes, we have our nice little black Saturn cube. There's your Saturn cube right there. ESG integration, they're talking about it. ESG is often conflated or used interchangeably with the term sustainable investing. You better be schooled on this one. This is not sustainable investing. We see sustainable investing as the umbrella and ESG as a data toolkit for identifying and informing solutions. So there is a whole thing here that BlackRock is going to put people through with ESG compliance right here. ESG aiming portfolio managers with tools and information to identify risks and opportunities within portfolios. It is not a values-based exercise. What they're doing is they're parsing the language. They're making it sound really good for people who, when they see values-based, oh my God. No, what they're doing is that they're commodifying these risk factors. And I've already told you what the risk factors are. Enhancing the investment process and implementing this across all our portfolios. It is not addressing stakeholder concerns by applying exclusionary screens based on immaterial ESG information. So they're commodifying all the fears. They're commodifying this so that all the quote unquote investment fears, like stakeholder, it's a whole stakeholder thing. Be careful with that. Making investment decisions that take financially material ESG information into account. It is not simply developing ESG versions of existing products while leaving processes unchanged. So essentially what they're doing here, it says each of our investment team is responsible for implementing ESG approaches in line with his investment mandate and is required to have a formal ESG integration statement to underpin its respective approach. Our portfolio managers are able to bring useful ESG information into their investment processes, discounting or emphasizing the information as they would any other financial input. Okay. So what they're trying to do here with that little check and X thing is to allay the fears. Oh, this isn't all just about values. And no, it is. It is. But they're just parsing the language and they're commodifying it as risk indemnification. They're turning it into an economic language and a metrics-based tool. But all those things they're talking about are part of the risk management. So if you don't play ball with BlackRock, you don't get the dough. So what does that mean? Okay, let's go back to the Pluto Return. If it's going to work in a corporate setting, and we know that that's exactly where they want to take this thing, then what's going to be the difference between a corporate setting and an individual one? If a corporation has to adhere to an ESG rating, then if we're all chits of the corporation, then wouldn't it make sense on some level that the individual would have to adhere to the same kind of commodification? That's social credit scores. And you're being looked at 24/7, right? In terms of your, guess what? Your risk priority. If you're a risky person, you're going to be much lower on the personal or the individual side of that ESG quotient. How does this relate to the Pluto return? If we go through an economic upheaval, which is quite possible here, okay, because we are dealing with hard money. The second house is hard money, hard assets, hard resources. When you get into Capricorn, you get into things like hierarchies, banks. BlackRock is fucking as Capricorn as it gets, I'm telling you. So this is one part of the story. And over here in the 8th house, we have Mercury, we have the part of fortune. True node is in Leo, which I kind of like for this country. We've lost a lot of that, though, unfortunately. I think we've gone into the South Node in Aquarius a bit more, especially when Saturn hit that South Node and we all got Fauci'd. Anyway, that's a different story, sort of. But we are dealing here with 8th house material, part of fortune, Mercury. It's all in opposition here. Now, Pluto, the natal Mercury in the U.S. is at what, 24. So Pluto has been on this pulling on the natal Mercury of the United States, which I think has been interesting because that's gotten into, I think that's helped a lot of conspiracy ideas come out. The people looking into things, this Pluto opposition, it's like, okay, what the fuck is going on here? We're going to go into the 8th house. We're going to drill down. And a lot of it came from these top-down edicts with Pluto. And Pluto was at what, 24. The Pluto-Saturn conjunction happened at 24 degrees. So it was right opposite the US Mercury. And that conjunction was when essentially time stopped. And people were like, okay, what is going on here? We need to get to the bottom of this thing, which I think has been good in a lot of ways. I think it's helped people become more aware. But what happens when you become more aware is you figure out that your awareness leads you into some pretty dark places, which Pluto will do. Like it'll initiate that rabbit hole to hell, unfortunately. But you got to keep going through. You got to go to the other side. That's just, you can't come back up. Anyway. So we are dealing with some 8th house issues here. And then economically, here's the true node. It's in Taurus. We can see here, South Node in Scorpio. Again, we're talking about other people's money, investments. And on this day, what do we talk about? We talked about the moon in Scorpio. It's right there. And as the day progresses, that moon is going to get closer to the South Node. And that could rattle people's security. We've already seen a bank run in Canada. Could this be indicative of another bank run? Possibly. Because I think the fear quotient as we move through the day on Tuesday gets higher as the moon gets closer to that South Node. That's my 2 cents. And we already have the United States Saturn at, where is it? The United States Saturn is not there. It's in Libra. I'm sorry, transiting Saturn. Yeah, we're going to have transiting Saturn here. So by the time the moon hits the South Node, it'll already be in square, right? Where's the moon? 50. Yeah, but by the end of the day, it moves into, and it's already in square with Saturn. Right, we got Saturn here at 16 and the moon right there. So yeah, it's not pretty. That's not fun. I think there's a lot of fear factor on Tuesday. Try to stay out of it. Try to stay out of the fear factor because it's so intense. Moon in Scorpio is very obsessive. There's some very obsessive energy here. What else do we have on this day? Transiting Mercury right here, conjuncting the South Node in Aquarius, second house. That's electronic money. That is electronic money. So there's an emphasis here. This is also somewhat interesting, but you can see with Juno conjuncting the South Node that there is the potential for something new to come out of this. I'm not quite sure that it's the something new that we ultimately want. But there is something new that can come out of this. And I think things that are connected to either online transactions, we could be looking at some bank runs here. We could also be looking at some issues with the internet. Cryptocurrency could be pretty tricky right around. So this, to me, this is the crisis zone right here. The moon coming in, conjuncting the South Node, the Pluto return, dealing with these basic foundational issues. The war thing, it's kind of in the air. I mean, we know it's in the air. We know what's happening with rumors of war, which is circulating and blowing around like a Sirocco, like a hot wind. But I feel like this has a lot to do with finances. This has a lot to do with dealing with this foundational piece around security. We're dealing with issues around security and financial security. And I think something here is taking place with that South Node in the US natal chart, in Mercury and Juno, leading again into this idea of something new, but it's not the something new necessarily that we want, especially with Saturn here on the other side of this. So I'm seeing this day as being economic. And if there are rumors of war, it can spark an economic panic. So try not to stress out too much. And if you are not prepared by now, you've got probably 24 hours to maybe top off your preps a little bit. I'm saying this slightly tongue in cheek, but I'm also being slightly serious here. Because of all the aspects, we know about the Pluto return. We know that that's taking place, but of all the aspects that are feeding into this, it's this moon conjunction with the South Node throughout that day. For me, it becomes very, very panicky, very, very panicky. And people's sense of security is not good. And squaring transiting Saturn. It's already in the square there. And this weird conjunction with Mercury and Juno with the South Node, which is in the second house, which points towards something new. We know that if they have this ESG that they're implementing in across the board with corporations now, and the technology that goes along with ESG, and it is hardcore AI, machine learning based technology, that they can't have that without the individual being a part of that. Well, why is that? Because the individual has to have a score that comes into the risk assessment, right? So let's say, for instance, you have an online portfolio of watching these videos that I do. You're going to be a risk. I'm just telling you, they'll add it all together. They'll collect all the data. It's like risk. You will be moved down the hierarchy. If you theoretically are doing the right things, right? And again, risk assessment has a lot to do with group identity. And if you belong to the quote unquote right group, the one that is at the least amount of risk, according to these assessors who are going to tweak these tools in order to recognize that risk, you'll have a good score. And guess what? You move in. Oh, hey, great. Come on in. Join the team. You got a great score. It really aligns with our ESG requirements. You're in. but they can't have ESG fully without the individual also being a part of the ESG equation, which means that they have to implement this kind of technology. And the only way they implement this kind of technology is if they implement a new financial system. And in order for them to implement a new financial system, the old one has to go away. And if there's anything about this day, and it could be triggered by war, rumors of war, I think we're at the greatest risk financially on this day, the 22nd, 2222222. And it's for all the reasons that I just stated. And people's security right here is literally off the charts, or insecurity. You could see things like a bank run. So there's a lot of factors. Everything is being ratcheted up. We've got, these rumors of war coming out of the mainstream media. They're not true, by the way. They're partial truths. The people of Ukraine do not want a fucking war. I'll tell you that right now. They don't want a war. Now, some reports have said there's really nothing going on here. So whatever you ingest from the mainstream media right now, you really need to have a big filter, a really big filter. And I would suggest that you start off this day, 2/22/22, like do something that connects you outside of this world that we're in now, except for listening to my show, of course. Yeah, before that, like go outside, hang out with a tree or meditate, or, just do something to ground yourself on Tuesday. I think it's a good practice any day, but Tuesday is really important. And I think on Tuesday, I'll just do some real time stuff, and, we'll look at what's happening, and I'll try to comment on it in a not so extreme and paranoid way. Okay. So we're 2 hours in. Why don't we stop there? I wanted to get into Chuck Dietrich's chart, but maybe I'll do that tomorrow. So that's a tease. If you like astrology, I'll get into Chuck Dietrich's chart tomorrow on 15 Minutes of Flame. That's 15 Minutes of Flame, OVFLAME, ofFlame.com. I'm there Monday through Thursday. And it's more about kind of, mashing the world. That's what we do on that show. So I'll be back tomorrow, 9:11 a.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to get into Synanon. I'll do a quick scan of the headlines. We'll look at Chuck Dietrich's very interesting chart. So I may even do a separate video and put it up here for you guys that, don't want to hang out or watch the replay. I'll probably cut out a separate video, just put it up here astrologically. All right. I think that's a wrap. For tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay cool, kiddies. Cool heads shall prevail. Don't let those cortisol things jack you up, right? Don't let your cortisol levels get all jacked up. Breathe, stay grounded. When you got those high cortisol levels, you cannot make good decisions. Okay? All right. There you go. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to recommend a really, really good YouTube channel. So if you want some good vibes, I discovered this YouTube channel this weekend. So let me put this in the chat. And there's a lot of really good stories in here with this channel. I like this guy a lot, although he's got a weird logo. Like, don't hold his logo against him. And he seems like he's a tiny bit of an elite. I don't want to frame him too much. But this guy I like him a lot, and I think he's doing really good work. And he connects in with all these different communities that are very different than ours. And the ones that I recommend straight out of the gate are his videos on Chicano culture in LA and Detroit. Those are two really good videos. The whole channel is really good. So I'm going to put the link in here. And if you need a uplifting video or two, I highly recommend this channel right there. So his name is Pete. He's been doing this. I mean, I don't know how long he's been doing it. He's got a pretty good following. So let's see. He started his channel when, I don't know. He's got close to a million subscribers. And there's a reason why. He's good at what he does. Check it out. You want to see some positive videos, people getting along in the world, our true path, right? Let's not forget that, our true path is to be brothers and sisters with one another and to help each other in this world. Jason Whitlock would call this a biblical view, and that we are here to assist and serve one another in the spirit of service, which is serving the Most High and God. I mean, this is what we're here to do. Like, the greatest thing that you could do in this world is to consciously serve another being, consciously, not unconsciously. You unconsciously serve somebody and you get sucked, right? To consciously serve another being is one of the highest things that we can do. Second highest thing is to consciously sacrifice yourself in a way for another being. And that would be parenthood. That's a huge, huge expression of the divine, of the Most High and God, right? So we're here ultimately to serve one another in the highest and best sense that we can. And a lot of this bullshit that we see in the world is so divisive and so toxic and so fractalizing that they can implement these ESG scores, right? This whole ESG scale. We don't fucking need it. All we really need is to understand this brotherhood and sisterhood that we have. And there are people that seem to be outside of that. Like, maybe this is, the ring of brotherhood and sisterhood. And some of these groups are really way out there on the fucking outer rings of this star system. Ultimately, there are brothers and sisters too. I mean, they are, and they may have been altered, and may have been gene spliced or genetically modified, and they may or may not be able to connect with us in a certain way, right? But I guarantee you, some of them can. So, you have to be discerning with everybody. Even people that, look like you and talk like you, and they may have the same kind of pointing. You got to be discerning with those people too. A little bit of discernment works. But ultimately, we've got to be able to help each other and serve each other in ways that are meaningful and valuable. When we do it in a balanced and fair and equal way, we are able to run our own system. We don't need these fucking social credit scores. We don't need the ESG bullshit. We can self-monitor our own spiritual expression with one another. And that's the greatest fear they have, because they don't implement these top-down structures that are based on surveillance, and they're based on their agendas and their hierarchies, and they're created by pitting us against one another in the inversion of values. So let's not let them do that. And let's stay open to this idea that, we are our own brothers and sisters keepers in a balanced way, never from an imbalanced place. All right. Well, check out some of those videos. They're super cool. Peter does a really good job. And that's it. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Please join us tomorrow, 15 minutes of flame.com. And if you're not here, if you're not there tomorrow, well, we'll see you here next week. Take care.